One Piece.
One Piece.
One Piece.
One Piece.
One Piece!
Oh, you have Sea of Thieves, One Piece? Imagine that.
So what happens when you combine One Piece with Sea of Thieves? Well, that's what I started wondering when I started watching One Piece not too long ago. And because of the experience of making an Attack on Titan fan game and a Chainsaw Man fan game, I felt like I had a pretty good shot at making something similar to what I had in mind. And also because a lot of you were commenting, asking for me to make this. So in Sea of Thieves, you explore on a pirate ship with your friends and visit islands to dig up treasure. So I wanted to take a similar gameplay loop and merge it with One Piece. And this might sound like a lot of work, but lucky for you guys, I love challenging myself to unrealistic expectations.
What will it cost?
Suffering.
What an idiot.
So before I even decided to make a fan game based on One Piece, I first need to make sure that the ship mechanics are even possible for me to make because I have no experience in making this.
We are screwed.
So Unreal Engine 5 has a new water system with buoyancy, so I started messing around with that and importing a Going Merry model and seeing if I could kind of make a ship mechanic. Eventually, I want the player to be able to walk up and actually be able to take control of the ship. Very similar to Sea of Thieves, be able to adjust the sails, lower them, and raise them, so you can kind of control it based on the wind, which I honestly thought was going to be a lot more work, but it ended up not taking as much as I expected. Obviously, this is nowhere near as good as Sea of Thieves, as I am just one person, but we take what we can get. So after a lot of trial and error, I have a working pirate ship, it's the Going Merry, and it's super cool. But now I actually need to make the players, the combat, the exploration, the core gameplay of the One Piece fan game. But first I want to tell you that this video has no sponsor at all. I've been making literally no money from doing all these fan games, and that's fine. I never planned on doing so. But recently I made a Patreon where you guys can support me for just $1.
$1. Seriously?
And on the Patreon, I'm going to be doing behind the scenes content, early access builds, and I'm even going to start making tutorial series on how to make fan games yourself. So if you've ever wanted to know how to make the grappling hook from my Attack on Titan fan game, or how to make the stretchy arms like Luffy in my One Piece fan game that I'm currently making, you can click the link in the description below to go to my Patreon and join as a member for just $1 a month. So be sure to check that out. But like I said, thank you all for the support. I really do appreciate it. And back to the video. So what I first did is I tried to find some models I could buy online for the actual crew that I was gonna make based on the One Piece cast. I found a Luffy model, so I rigged it for Unreal Engine and imported it in, set up all the materials. The first thing I noticed right away is because there was no cell shading set up on this character, he looked a bit like semi-realistic, which kind of looked off to me. So I noted down to add some sort of cell shading material to the characters later on, just so they don't look out of place and they look a bit more anime stylized. So a lot of blueprint coding later. I had Luffy in the game running around. Pretty simple stuff, but you know, Luffy's known for something, and that is for being very, very stretchy. So what did I do? I made his arms very stretchy. I took the mechanic that you see in a lot of games like Sekiro, where you can kind of use a grapple hook to kind of launch yourself to a further location. But instead of having a grapple hook, I took Luffy's arms and made them stretch out to a point and basically reel yourself in. And to do this was a bit more complicated than I expected, as unlike just a grapple hook going out, I had to actually make Luffy's arm stretch. And to do this, I basically hid Luffy's hand and then made a stretchy hand mesh that stretches out to the location by getting the transform of the world location. And because it happened so fast, it actually looks okay. And I'm sure there's probably a better way to have done this, but we work with jank, it works fine.
Man, this place is janked up. Wow.
And then I quickly found some other models, imported them in, and now we have the Straw Hat crew. The next thing was making the actual mechanics and the fighting and the combat and stuff like that. And I wanted to opt in for something different. I wanted to allow players to use different Devil Fruit abilities and different weapons, regardless of who they're playing as. So here's Luffy using a sword, which is
That's illegal? Very illegal.
and here's Zoro using a gun, because why not? So I threw together a menu where you can pick your favorite character from the Straw Hat crew. But one of the main features I wanted to implement is multiplayer. Because one of the best parts of playing Sea of Thieves is being able to play it with your friends. Feeling like a crew straight out of Pirates of the Caribbean.
I prefer rum. Rum's good.
But thankfully, up until this point, my big brain made sure to replicate everything I was doing so far. Now, in Unreal Engine, replication is basically what you do to make things work on a server. It's where you decide if you want to replicate certain things to a client or through the server, vice versa. So, thankfully, up until this point, I already had everything ready for multiplayer, sorta. I mean, you know, it's still just me making all this. So I actually stole a bit of the code from my own fan game, my Attack on Titan fan game, where there already is multiplayer, which you can play right now for free, by the way. And I chucked the server browser and hosting system using Epic Online Services. Once again, Shout out Fortnite. And with that, we have a multiplayer system in place. And one of the next things I needed to work on, the islands to explore, the ocean. The whole point of this would be to explore, to find the One Piece. I haven't got to that part yet. I mean, technically the manga hasn't really gotten there either, so hopefully you can forgive me. So I quickly started using the landscape tool, building out some islands, just a few to get things started for now, just while I test things, and eventually I would go through and make this a lot bigger, more islands with a bit more detail. But what we have here is basically a really rough outline. From there, I painted some trees, added some materials, and we kind of have something a little bit similar to Sea of Thieves, but a bit of a twist. So we have an island, we have a boat system, we have the characters, but what we're missing now is enemies to fight. So while one of the first locations I wanted to make was from very early on in One Piece, I decided that one of the first enemies I wanted to make, instead of it just being pirates, which is, very typical, was actually do fishmen. And yeah, they're literally dudes who are fish. So I looked online and I found a model that kind of represented a fishman of sorts, and I imported him in and started setting up the AI. For combat, I didn't want to go too deep for now because I was more worried about spending too much time on this project, because I do make these fan games in my spare time, kind of just for fun. So I decided to go for something involving attacking and blocking. So when you attack enemies, they can block your attacks, and they can also attack you with melee, or in some cases ranged attacks. So after a lot of hours later, we have AI that will actually shoot you with a crossbow or attack you with a sword, and I even made it that they drop loot on death. But we need an inventory system for that, so I decided to go for a simple grid-based inventory where you can pick up items you find, and I was hoping to do some sort of like quest system of sorts. As in Sea of Thieves, there's actually a little system in place where you can take like bounties of sorts, little quests which take you to an island and you have to find treasure. So I opted for something sort of similar, but with a bit of a twist on it. You actually interact with NPCs, which are characters from the show, on the islands, and they actually give you little quests to do. Like in this quest where Zoro has a little conversation with you and he tells you that you need to go fight some fishmen further down on the island. And once you complete the quest, you can return back to him for some rewards. Because I wanted this to play almost like an RPG, I added a very basic leveling system, some basic stats that adjust certain attributes of your character. Nothing too crazy, just something to give it a bit more depth, because in the end, this is just a little fan game. And then I wanted to work on a big boss fight, and this is why one of the first big locations I wanted to make from One Piece itself was Arlong Park. There are obviously other very, very cool villains, antagonists in One Piece further down the line, but I do think Arlong was one of the first big ones, especially in the first arc of One Piece. So I started building Arlong Park. I threw it in just exactly like how it looks in the show, albeit not as good quality, all in preparation for the next video where I'm going to be making the boss fight for Arlong. So make sure you're subscribed for that. So there you go, that's my One Piece fan game. It's not ready just yet, as I do want to take some more time on it, get things working, and kind of finish off those things like I mentioned, like the big boss fight. And just like all my other fan games, it'll be completely free to play, completely non-profit, so I do hope you enjoy it when it comes out in the future. So if you're looking forward to it and you want to stay up to date, be sure to subscribe for part 2.